Welcome everybody. Welcome back. Nice to see everybody. We are beginning our study again, our Thursday morning classes. And what we're going to be doing is a little bit of continuation of what we were doing back in the summer and before, but really also starting a new course of study. We're going to be looking at the Parsha, or really elements of the Parsha, because to read the whole Parsha would take a very long time. My idea is to look at maybe two different aspects or three of every portion and really get into depth and talk about a big idea with commentators, with discussion, and kind of get into depth and I call it the Torah treasures, because come out with a treasure, come out with a treasure that can reverberate in our minds a little bit throughout the week, and that's what the purpose of the Parsha is, right? You read the Torah, and you touch a little piece of eternity, a little something that's touching on human nature, on what it means to have a relationship with God, and then, having that be revealed, a new treasure, and that carrying that piece with you, the rest of the week, having that open up a little corner of the mind and of the soul, hopefully. And also just nice to be able to talk together. And so our method is going to be a little bit similar to what we were doing before. We're going to read little sections of the Parsha and then get into depth with commentaries and discussions and to some of the big questions and how it relates to our lives, and to where we stand thousands of years later. I mean, it's always a discovery that a text can have meaning thousands of years after it came into being. And that's part of it's because of the power of the text in my mind, and part of it is because we've been in a relationship for so long. So we're just taking one more step. We're not starting from zero. We're not creating a relationship with a different ancient text. This is a text we already have a relationship with, and we're just laying one more little strand. Okay, so maybe since we have at least one person who's a little bit new, let's have everybody just say quickly their name. So I don't know, who wants to start?
I'm Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello.
I'm Nancy Alexander. Nice to see you all this morning.
Hello.
David Class.
Berlin. I'm Norma Berlin.
Bonnie Class.
Where are you, Bonnie? There you are.
Phil Furtick.
Hello.
Alan Paris.
Hello.
And Howard, that leaves you. You're on mute, by the way. You are on mute.
He's still on mute.
Still can't hear you. Still can't hear you for some reason. Your mute is off, but somehow we can.
Okay.
Oh, now we can hear you.
Yes, I'm Howard Rigg. Sorry for the confusion here.
All right. Good to have you with us. So let's begin. We're going to be reading two sections from the Parsha. And we're going to be reading English, but we can also have Hebrew to help guide us. Right, the Parsha this week is Noah, a great Parsha. So the two sections we're going to be reading about are even a little bit before a portion, the beginning of before the building of the ark really gets into place, when God commands Noach in the building of the ark and why he does. And then we're going to read a little bit of the Tower of Babel. And I guess with the story of Noah, we're going to be looking at a question which I want to present before we even read it, which is a really age-old question, which was, well, how righteous was Noach? How much of a good guy was Noach? Was Noach a really good guy or just a good guy? And, who was Noach? Is he someone to aspire to? And with all of that are questions like, well, Noach is saves the world, right? He puts the animals on the ark, but he's not the first Jew. Abraham is the first Jew. Noach does not get that distinction of being the first Jew. And there's that old question, which we're going to get to, of, well, why didn't he argue with God, right? Why didn't he try and save the other people? But like, what, what is it? What does it mean to be righteous? That's a big question. And then with the Tower of Babel, we're going to get to the question of, well, what did they do wrong? What was so bad about what they did? What was so bad? They were building a tower. So we're now going to get to this. All right. Okay. And anybody can jump in at any moment for a comment. Okay, here we go. Alan, continue with tradition.
Tradition. Okay,
I'm going to make it bigger here.
thank you.
All right. Oh, too big. There we go.
Adonai saw how great was human wickedness on earth, how every plan devised by the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. And Adonai regretted having made humankind on earth. With a sorrowful heart, Adonai said, I will blot out from the earth humankind whom I created, humans together with beasts, creeping things, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor with Adonai. This is the line of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. When God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth, God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make it an ark with compartments and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make an opening for daylight in the ark and terminate it within a cubit of the top. Put the entrance to the ark on its side, make it with bottom, second, and third decks. For my part, I am about to bring the flood, waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh under the sky, in which there is a breath of life. Everything on earth shall perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark with your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives. And all of that lot lives, and of all that lives, of all flesh, you shall take. Hold on one sec.
Okay. Okay, well, we wait.
I'm ready. I was just trying to mute my phone.
Okay.
Of all that lives, of all flesh, you shall take 2 of each into the ark to keep alive with you. They shall be male and female, from birds of every kind, cattle of every kind of creeping thing on earth. 2 of each shall come to you to stay alive. For your part, take of everything that is eaten and store it away to serve as food for you and for them. Noah did so just as God commanded him. So he did. Then Adonai said to Noah, go into the ark with all your household, for you alone have I found righteous before me in this generation.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So, okay, we read this whole bit. Anything pop out at people? Did Anybody surprised by those few lines before the beginning of the Parsha when God says he actually wanted to destroy all the animals too originally?
That surprised me. I don't ever remember reading that, talking about that. And that seems very vengeful. Because I mean, the animals don't have, well, we assume the animals don't have free will. They're not really doing good or bad. They're kind of being animals, and
Yeah.
yet God's going to destroy them.
Well, it's
So-
possible the animals were corrupted by the man. My reading of this is there was some sort of a corruption going on, some either mixture of the species or forbidden mixtures that were taking place according to, at least according to God. And therefore he had to wipe out everything. So the people somehow were creating forbidden mixtures within themselves
Huh.
and within the animals, crossbreeding, etc.
Thank you.
It was it's a pretty stark verse, is the God regrets, right? God was sad and just looked down and everything, every day, all day, everything was bad.
Well, right before those lines, was there something that said about the lawlessness and about how bad the people were?
It doesn't go into much detail about all of it. I mean, it's just there's the laws before that are even more strange. Before that, it's even more strange because we're not going to get into it. But if you go, the line before is when, right? It was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth when divine beings cohabitated with the human women who bore them offspring. Such are the heroes. So that's a whole other thing.
Well,
But,
that's a forbidden mixture too.
Yes.
That's true too. So, but really, right? He regretted he saw how great was human wickedness on earth, how every plan devised by the human body, nothing but evil all the time. And I regretted having made humankind on earth with a sorrowful heart. And he wanted to blot it out, but Noah found favor with God. And this is the line of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. That's the key line. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. So let's go a little bit into commentators. All right.
Before we
Go for it.
talk about Noah, can we talk a little bit about God regretting his creation? I mean, wouldn't God have foreseen what was going to happen? Isn't that what we think in our tradition, that, you know, God's kind of known it all, and it just seems, you know, it seems odd that God would regret that he didn't know what was going to happen, that he didn't set it in motion.
Well, he gave free will. So people had free will, and even if on some level he knew it was going to happen, you know, it was still saddening for him to see the direction human beings were picking. But I mean, but yes, the commentaries go on and on about the how this could have been. How did he regret? And you know, it's a parable of a king or of a parent who sees their child and knew their child was going in bad directions, but it still makes them sad to see that their child is continuing to go in sad directions. Or, but it's a very human emotion. It's very difficult for people who are very rational, who don't like ascribing emotions to God. But in some ways, this is one of the most difficult ones in the whole Torah. That God regretted creating human beings because of, but it's also a continuation of what happened with the story of Adam and Eve, which we read last week. Anybody have any thoughts on that before we begin with Noah?
I would only say that this is one of the classic questions that Alan raises, and that this is not the God of Maimonides, although Maimonides would try to argue against that on some level. But on another level, he would concede that point that this was written for people.
Right, and it's in the language of man, and it makes it dramatic, in a sense. But it's one of the great paradoxes of how we understand God, which is both that we have free will, which means we do have free will. On the other hand, if we have free will, how can God know everything that's going to happen? On the other hand, if God knows everything that's going to happen, how do we have free will? And why doesn't God stop things from happening? So it's we can.
I think it's interesting to think about how it can be that if God created man in his image, how he could then come to regret having made man.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe all the more so regretting it because he created God in his image, and God, and man went so far from where, I mean, right? The basis of how we understand the Garden of Eden in Judaism is that out of the story of the Garden of Eden and the eating of the fruit, man has two sides: a good side and a not so good side. A Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. That's the rabbinic kind of framing. One of the main rabbinic framings of that story. So we each have a good side and not so good side, which is the essence of our free will. You know, do we go one way or do we go the other way? And so when we get to a point where we've completely embraced the not so good side, then we've really done a bad job of using our free will. You know, we've completely imagine a whole world where there's really nothing good, you know, that's really human beings have just gone so far into evil. That's a depressing, you know, you create a creation and give it free will. I mean, right, in mysticism, God contracts himself or herself to create space for creation to exist, right? So there's a contraction of the divine. Tzimtzum. So on some level, God contracts himself or herself to make room for creation and to make room for free will. And then this is what happens. But God has the power to then, okay, I'm going to decontract myself and just throw out the whole thing and start again. But it's kind of like, we're like a little experiment. We're a little plant that God's trying to grow and didn't go so well.
We're like a simulation, which is sort of a modern way of looking at that. A simulation of something created by a simulator who throws into the simulation a copy of his own intellect. But his own intellect has the free will in it. So we, in fact, are like that.
Right. And so it's one of the biggest mysteries. I recently read someone ask, you know, why was the world created to a Rebbe? And the Rebbe says, well, you know, how can the eye see itself? How can an eye see itself? How can you see yourself? You need to put up a mirror, and the creation is the mirror to the divine. To see itself. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into this. It's very esoteric ideas, but it's. I think it is it's a nice question to frame our whole discussion on, which is so God creates a simulation. God is a simulator, and it doesn't give us free will, and it's not going very well. And so God says, "Well, I might just press the reset button, you know, press power." Reset, power off, power back on, you know, the press Control Alt Delete, see what, you know, let's get this whole computer started again. But then he sees, okay, at least there's one tiny piece that's not so bad. So let's go to Noach. Let's go to Noach. Unless anybody else wanted to continue with our discussion of the other. Okay.
I just have
Just one point about free will. Free will can be thought through with the concept also of self-reference. Your concept about the eye seeing itself is a self-reference. And if you think a lot about self-reference, you end up with an opening to itself, which could be called free will. That's a mathematical form, actually, that God worked out in the beginning of the 20th century, the concept of self-reference. So anyway, it's a very interesting way of thinking about free will.
Can I just ask a humbler point, a grammatical point? I mean,
Sure.
because it says, because I like David's point. I can't build on that, but I'm confused about this. It says in verse 7, the way it's translated here, I will blot out the men whom I created, which I guess is the translation of Adam, the man, the human being. It's singular in form there. And then it says, so, but here they translate it as a plural, and then it says, the men together with the beasts and the creeping things and the birds of the sky. I regret that I made them, asitem. So he regrets, I regret I made them.
Asitim, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, asitim. So
It's strange. Asitim is strange.
So is he saying there, I mean, just in terms of the grammar, is he saying there, I regret that I made them the man? Or is he saying, I regret that I made them the men and the beasts and the creeping things and the birds of the sky, but by the way, not apparently the fish, because they're not going to get rubbed out in the plan I have.
So what's the question? Is it about Adam? Is your question about Adam?
The question is really about the asitim. Is he regretting all the creatures? Is it understood to mean he's regretting creating all those creatures, or only the human beings, because they've been the bad actors?
Asitim is some form of asiti or tam, that I made them. I think it's all of them. You know, it's I see. So no, you're right. It's strange because is the second clause extrapolating from the first clause of ha'adam, or is it referring to all the things? You're saying, does he regret having made that I made them with the beasts and everything? Okay, we can have a quick look over Rashi. Let's see what Rashi says. From man to beast, these also corrupted their way. Another explanation is all things were created on man's account when he sees to be one need of them. So there, he is reading it as being also destroying all the animals. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Let's go to Noah. Was Noah a righteous man? So what's your impression of Noah from this story?
One.
Just from reading it. How would you characterize Noah's?
Well, he appeared to be an exemplary figure.
Right? Yeah. He appears to be an exemplary figure. You know what? Let's get into the big question with Rashi, and then we'll start to discuss. Okay. So Norma, do you mind reading this Rashi in his generations?
In his generations, some of our rabbis explain it, this word, to his credit. He was righteous even in his generation. It follows that had he lived in a generation of righteous people, he would have been even more righteous owing to the force of good example. Others, however, explain it to his discredit. In comparison with his own generation, he was accounted righteous. But had he lived in the generation of Abraham, he would have been accounted as of no importance. Find that a little strange, because if the guy is good, he's good no matter what generation he's in. I mean, there could have been other good people too, but that wouldn't. If he's a nice person, I don't see how he could be of no importance.
What counts, by the way, is being righteous? What does that exactly mean? Does that mean that you're a follower of all of God's commandments to the letter without thinking about them, or maybe even thinking about them? What does being righteous mean? What are we talking about here?
Well, there are no commandments at this point, so right there's a question of what does righteous mean, and as you were talking, Norma, I was thinking, it's true when you're good, and one can also make an argument that, when I remember I was talking to someone in this congregation whose spouse is from Wisconsin, and they were saying that when they met their spouse, they were like, why is he smiling all the time? Why is he so happy and so jolly and so nice? And then they went to Wisconsin, where they were from, and they're like, oh, everybody here is like that, So it's kind of like, there's also culture, right? And if you're a smiley, good-natured person, but everybody around you is smiling, good-natured, you get as much. Does that just mean you're like everybody? Or could it also be, if you're in a place where everybody's killing and pillaging, and you're just like, okay, I'm only beating other people, I'm not killing, or does that make you righteous? So this is the other part of the Rashi, where Rashi kind of tries, this is Rashi explaining more why Noah might not have been that great. Do you mind reading this next one, Norma? Noah walked with God.
Noah walked with God. In the case of Abraham, scripture says, Genesis 24:40, God, before whom I walked. Noah needed God's support to uphold him in righteousness. Abraham drew his moral strength from himself and walked in his righteousness by his own effort. Genesis Rabbah 30:10.
Yeah.
So in other words, Noah was a good guy, but he needed God to help him along, whereas Abraham just had his own inner strength.
Yep. So part of the question is Noah to be blamed for not having tried to save the other people?
Mm.
So some people feel that he was, he didn't argue, right? Abraham argues with God to save the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, but he says to Noah, I'm going to kill everybody, build an ark. And Noah says, okay. He doesn't say, really? You're going to kill everybody? Noah says, okay, this makes sense to me. I'm going to build my ark and save myself. But not everybody sees it that way. So here we're getting to Ramban. Somebody read the Ramban for us. Nachmanides.
I'll read it. He was a righteous man and wholehearted. Scripture mentions that he was guiltless and perfect in his righteousness, in order to inform us that he was worthy to be saved from the flood without any punishment whatever, since he was wholehearted in righteousness.
Okay. So he was, and then read this other little bit by Ramban, please.
The correct interpretation, according to the plain meaning of Scripture, appears to be that he alone was a righteous man in those generations, there being no righteous or wholehearted men except him in those generations.
Okay. So it's saying he's not agreeing that he was just righteous for his generations, but righteous. He was the only righteous man in all of them. And now we're going to get this Sforno, an Italian commentator. Go ahead, please continue, Howard. He walked in God's way.
He walked in God's way, trying to be helpful to others and to instruct, and if necessary, to rebuke them, as our sages pointed out. This is also in accordance with what the historian Barusi Hakaldai, 3rd century BC, wrote about him.
Okay.
Others?
The second half of this verse is a very strange comment. So Forno is saying, right, that actually Noah did try. He went around trying to be helpful to others, and he tried to instruct them, and if necessary, rebuke them. And in such an evil generation, that might not have been an easy thing to do, right? If everybody's evil and you're going around and trying to be helpful and instruct, and rebuke people, that might not make you the most popular guy around. Second half of the verse I just brought because I thought I looked up Barusi Ha-Kaldai, couldn't find him anywhere else. I don't know where Sforno came up with this guy. And this 3rd century BC historian, I have no idea where this came from.
It wasn't very important.
It's much like when you look at footnotes in scholarly publications,
Yeah.
and many of them don't exist.
Yes. I think I don't know where Sforno found out about first of all, a historian in the 3rd century BC is rare, and especially one who's going to be writing historically about Noah.
Yeah.
Going back to what Rashi said,
yeah,
it almost has the feeling that just because we consider Abraham to be our first forefather, he's got to elevate Abraham,
right,
by de-elevate, whatever the right word is, by putting down Noah. But when we think about the story of Abraham, he wasn't always such a good guy. If you remember the story about when he wanted to, or was it when the king wanted to take Sarah?
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, Sarah's my sister, not my." He didn't defend her.
Go ahead.
His wife.
Yeah.
So it just sort of seems like, well, I don't want to go repeat it.
No, thanks. Well, what do you think? To be a righteous person, do you have to go out and stop other people from being righteous? Do you have to kind of really, the essence is, the way they see it is, do you have to really be strong within yourself and care about other people's, or can you just be righteous within yourself in a vacuum? Let's keep reading. Someone else, Or Chaim. This is going to be a long comment. Really very interesting, bringing a lot of stuff. Someone want to read this one? Moroccan commentator.
No one else wants to.
Okay.
There is another message contained in this verse, which is commented upon in Bereshit Rabbah 25:2. The Midrash discusses whether Noach's name was in itself blissful, or whether, in view of Noach's righteous way of life, the blessings he conferred on earth were subsequently reflected in his name.
Because Noah, the name Noach means peaceful or blissful, or yeah.
Here is some of the discussion. When God created Adam, he invested him with a full range of authority. The cow obeyed the plowman. The furrow cooperated with the plow. As soon as Adam sinned, the cow no longer responded to its owner, nor did the earth respond to the plow. This situation continued until the time of Noach. Once Noach appeared on earth, the situation changed in man's favor. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish added that until Noach, the waters would flood the earth, something that stopped during Noach's time. At any rate, the name Noach is repeated in our verse to indicate the beneficial effect his existence had on the well-being of his peers. The repetition of the word
Toldot, generations, yeah,
and the use of the word
Ish, person,
are an allusion to the fact that Noah was Ish Ha'adamah, an outstanding farmer. as is stated explicitly after the deluge. Our sages find Noach's successful impact on farming alluded to in 529, where his father Lamech predicts that his son Noach will provide relief for
That's Vonya Denu.
the painful labor of our hands. The fact that Noach was born without a foreskin gave rise to these hopes. Apparently, Noach invented a usable plow. The word tzaddik hints that the righteous is the foundation of the universe. But without a righteous person, the universe would forfeit its reason for existence. But for Noach, the earth would have perished at the time of the deluge. The word
Tamim.
should be understood in the same vein as the Talmud, Avodah Zarah 10 explains it. The Talmud understands the word tzaddik as a reference to Noach's deeds, whereas the word tamim is a reference to Noach's lifestyle, his attitudes, as opposed to understanding the word as an adjective describing his righteousness. All of this is additional praise for Noach, who was able to perfect his personality in the face of such wicked contemporaries. Noach did far more than could have been expected of him. Our sages call such conduct
Lifnei Mishurat Hadin, which means to go beyond the letter of the law. He went beyond what was expected. Yeah.
According to Samuel 2, God asks, what's it, where I just
The loyal, where is he?
okay. God acts loyally with the loyal, whereas he uses wile in dealing with the perverse. According to this yardstick, Noach would have been free to do likewise, but he chose to be more considerate than required by law. When the Torah describes Noach's perfection, this means that his goodness was recognized even by the people of his time. The plural in the expression
Vidorav
Tav reminds us that the average person's lifespan involves 3 generations. He lives during part of his father's generation, his contemporaries, and during part of his children's generation. Noach was unique during all these 3 generations. His only righteous member of a former generation that he shared time on earth with was his grandfather Methuselah. When the Torah tells us, and I'm not going to try it, that Noach walked with God, this means that even vis-a-vis God, Noah's conduct was very constructive. Our sages tell us in connection with Noach's offering after the deluge that Noach's name is alluded to in the word nichoch.
This is God smelt the pleasant smell. And right, this is like we say with the sacrifices, a pleasant smell of the sacrifices. So he made a sacrifice that was pleasant, and Noach's name itself means pleasant, Noach. So he was saying there was an illusion that Noach was like the pleasant sacrifice, right? Yeah, that's where he got his name. Maybe he's alluding to too. Go ahead. The reason
the Torah repeats the name Noach at the beginning is to refer to the second dimension of Noach's beneficial effect on mankind. When God decided not to bring another deluge ever due to Noach's gratitude. The reason the Torah uses the verb halech when describing Noach's conduct vis-a-vis God is because God describes a desirable conduct by man in those terms in Deuteronomy 28:9. When the Torah here employs the reflexive
Hitalech, yeah.
hitalech, this merely emphasizes that Noach kept walking with God. He provided pleasure to his creator all the time, something which found its ultimate expression in his sacrifice after the deluge.
Okay, thank you. I know that was very long, but very interesting, right? And Noach, Or Chaim is a big fan of Noach, right? He's a big fan of him. So I just wanted before, because I do want to get a little bit to the other story. So we're going to read one more little midrash here, which goes the other way. And then we're going to start talking about it a little bit more. So someone else, please read. Phil, do you mind reading Bereshit Rabbah?
Sure, not at all. Bereshit Rabbah. And Noah walked with God. Rabbi Judah said, this may be compared to a king who had two sons, one grown up and the other a child. To the child, he said,
walk with me, sorry.
Walk with, oh, okay. Walk with me. Oh, right, like no. But to the adult, walk before me. Similarly, to Abraham, whose moral strength was great, he said, walk thou before me. That's that. Of Noah, whose strength was feeble, Noah walked with God, the phrase we have here. Rabbi Nehemiah said he might be compared to a king's friend who was plunging about in dark alleys, and when the king looked out and saw him sinking in the mud, he said to him, instead of plunging about in dark alleys, come and walk with me. But Abraham's case is rather to be compared to that of a king who was sinking in dark alleys. A king who was sinking in dark alleys, and when his friends saw him, he shone a light for him through the window. Said he to him, instead of lighting me through the window, come and show a light before me. Even so did the Holy One, blessed be he, say to Abraham, instead of showing a light for me from Mesopotamia and its environs, come and show one before me in Eretz Israel.
Next two.
To who? So was he righteous or not? What did the whole, right? The Midrash is saying again, it's going deeper into this claim of, Noah was just a passive man who God came to rescue because he was good amongst a bad generation. Or can someone like Noach, right? Noach means pleasant or blissful. Does just being that confer God loved Noach because of it, and Noah was affecting the other people. I mean, I think it's an interesting point when Or Chaim says that Noach uplifted the whole world, or that the whole world can be saved for one tzaddik, and that is the plain meaning of the Torah, right? He's planning to destroy the whole world, and then he says, "Okay, I'm not going to destroy the whole world because Noach is okay." So if we go back to the long thing with Noach of Or Chaim, of how good Noach was, and that his name was creating, really shifting, and that he was a man of the earth. What did you make of all of that? That he was this outstanding farmer, and that somehow that added to his righteousness.
Isn't the ground cursed at this point? Did I read that in the section?
I think it's playing on that, right? That the ground is cursed with.
Yeah, in 29, 529, the ground's cursed. Right?
But
Noah's born. When Noah is born in 5, verse 5, in chapter 5, his father Lamech names him Noah, saying, this one will provide us relief from our work. I'm not even sure what that means. And from the toil of our hands, but that seems reminiscent of what God tasked man with in Eden, right? After after they
The
eat.
fruit is eaten. Mhm.
Yeah, after they eat the fruits, right? And then it goes on to say, out of the very soil with which Adonai placed under a curse. So the land is cursed. What is the curse? The curse that it's going to give man difficulty in making it produce for men.
Mhm.
But if Noah is pleasant and blissful, I don't understand how that relieves the soil of a curse. Or is it that God created Adam out of the dust, out of the earth, out of the soil, right?
Mhm.
And we've seen from the very beginning that human beings they're just rebellious and they're evil. I mean, if we get anything out of the creation of man, it's that man is imperfect, humankind is imperfect, and inclined to sin. Okay, all these generations
Yes,
are
very nice.
inclined to sin, and they all stem from the earth. So I don't understand why Noah is foretold by his father to provide relief from our work, the toil of our hands. I don't understand what the connection is. I understand where that comes from, but I don't understand how Noah's being righteous. And I'm not sure I'm not sure that's an absolute righteousness. I'm not sure righteousness is absolute in any age. I mean, isn't
Mhm.
righteousness relative to the times that you're living in regardless? I mean, is there an absolute standard for righteousness? I don't see one having been established in the first 5 books of Genesis. I mean,
Yeah.
is righteousness according to this? It was he was blameless in his age and walked with God.
So you're saying, is righteousness invariant as to time, as to history?
I don't know.
Or is it something that is it something that takes its shape during its particular historical era?
No.
It's hard to know.
It is hard to
My sense actually is that it's invariant as to history. If we talk about righteousness in a general form of it, it has to do essentially with the perfection of our human form being in balance. So the human form is invariant as to history. So I would say that righteousness, which is the human form, my conception of it is the human form being in balance. So it has to do with grace, it has to do with goodness, it has to do with all of the virtues that we think about when we think about virtues. And those are the same virtues that everybody has thought about for all of time.
Well, it's actually it's a very topical question because, right, we're going back to historical figures and saying, well, they were righteous. We've always considered them righteous, but in this way, according to our perception of what we consider righteous now, they were deficient in this way, or they were anti-Semitic, or they were racist, or they were this, or they were that. Does that make them not righteous if everybody else was not righteous? I mean, it kind of, what does it mean if that's a conversation that's happening in society at the moment about what it means to be, back at times where, in Abraham's time, they had the opportunity to fight for those who were evil. Noah didn't fight for those who were evil, but he was living in a different time, a different world. Is that mapping on a different morality onto Noah?
That's the question. If he's living in a generation of sinners and he's the one that Adonai selects, right, because he is walking with Adonai, then he's not a sinner. And does righteousness exist only if there are sinners?
I think it's a
Yeah.
is he only righteous compared to his generations, but a deeply flawed person otherwise? I mean, the part of the deep flaw is also what happens afterwards, right? When the ark lands and he comes out of the ark, right? He plants a vineyard and gets drunk, and then something happens we are not quite sure what with his son, who sees his nakedness, or something happens, and then he curses him, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah. And if he's walking with God, then why is it wrong to plant a vineyard and get drunk on the fruit of the vine? I mean, I don't understand that either. But that's going ahead.
Can we do another beat on the question of Noah as a farmer?
Sure.
Was that in the Orah Chaim?
Chaim, yeah, or Chaim, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was interesting. It's as if he was saying that there was this Edenic future that didn't happen because of what happened in the garden, that where people, it would be easy to plow the land and so on. And it's being, in a way, recreated in a way by human efforts and skill or something like that. And maybe I'm way off on that. I don't know.
No,
that's what I'm asking about. Really,
it's interesting, because when Nancy was mentioning that, what I was thinking was that they're part of the whole discussion of right, Adam and Eve are no longer in harmony with the divine creation, right? They had one law which they disobeyed, and the moment they went out of harmony with the world, suddenly everything fell, right? They fell, right? They went out of harmony. They didn't follow the divine guidelines, and that created this chain reaction where everything didn't happen as it should have, right? They're no longer in harmony with the land. They have to work very hard to get its bounty. Their women suffer in childbirth. They're going to know night and day and pain and all these things, right? They're out of harmony with the harmony that they experience in the garden. And then everything goes bad, right? The first murder, all these things happen. And then Noah, who's pleasant, who is blissful, somehow restores some of that harmony with the land, or that harmony between human beings and God, or human being and the world. So it kind of gives human beings the agency to restore that sense of harmony by their spiritual conduct, right? Your spiritual conduct within yourself gives you an ability to also restore harmony with physical reality. That's, as you were saying, kind of almost a connection to the Garden of Eden. And so he's always saying that, right? Because he spiritually or morally he was righteous, that then translated into the world suddenly realigned to allow everything to be back and I think that's a kind of a spiritual religious comment that the Torah is making about human beings, that part of the whole story of the Torah is that human beings have the ability to restore some of the harmony and bliss that was the garden if we act in line to God's ways, if we act in line to what God expects of us.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, that rings true what you just said.
And go ahead.
But we have to choose that, and that's the free will. We have the will to choose to walk with Adonai, or to choose a more sinning path, right? That's the balance. That's the struggle. That's the eternal struggle. How do we choose the righteous path when there's so many other temptations, when it's so much easier to just be a sinner?
And beautiful.
It's easier to be a sinner.
It's easy.
Wait, what sins are you sort of looking to sort of taste these days?
It's easy to ignore the other, right? It's easy not to treat treat our neighbor as ourselves.
But that's not true, actually. I think it's much easier to not. It's much easier to be a good person, what most people consider to be a good person, because one feels internally to be more balanced. I think balance is the whole thing. And we humans know lots about balance. We have 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 ears and 2 eyes. We have a two-ness to us, which allows us to be centered. So all of these things are centering things. This is essentially what the rabbi just said. He talked about a harmony between us and nature.
There might be so in some ways the sins are obviously, according to Torah, the bad things, but maybe the sin is coming out of that harmony, right? And so once you're out of that harmony, and maybe I'll conclude here, but we didn't have time to get to it, and next time I'll be more pointed with what we do. But what happened with the story of Babel, the Tower of Babel, right? After Noah's story, God says, I'm not going to destroy human beings anymore. And then all the people come together. They only have one language, and they start to build a tower that storm the heavens, right? And then God comes down and says, whoa, they're building a tower to storm the heavens. I'm going to confuse their languages to not allow this to happen. So once again, humanity had a choice. All the commentators, we don't have time to get to this, but they had a high philosophical and technological culture, which is what the commentators say. And they could have done anything. They could have built a temple at that point. They could have built something beautiful, but instead they said, we're going to use our collective smarts and abilities to try and create a tower of avodah zarah, of idol worship. And that's where they went. So it's essentially the same question again. They were in that harmony, but they twisted the harmony to make it about their own aggrandizement and so God said, I've got to further change the rules of the game so that you don't have that same culture, that same language, that same religion, and make people in all their diversity. And now you won't be able to use the power I've given you as a human being, which is what it's about from the very beginning. God gives us a power as human beings in his likeness. How are we going to use that power? And the beginning of our story, our prehistory, is about human beings using that power not for good. And so God taking away some of that power from us until we can't do as much bad. And then it's up to us to long climb back, to learn to use free will, to do good and to be in harmony and to taste a little bit more of Eden.
With respect to that story, it may be useful to take a look at the Greeks have an absolutely equivalent story, which is spoken about in Plato's Symposium, Aristophanes' speech, when Zeus cuts apart the people, because the people, he splits them into 2. These were different shaped people in those days. But anyway, he splits them into 2 because they became very powerful, and their notion was they were attacking the abode of the gods. And it may be useful to read Aristophanes' speech in Plato's Symposium, and you get you get a sort of an equivalent sense of what the Tower of Babel idea is.
Thank you for that. Well, I'll look it up. And well, thanks everyone. I think for next week we're gonna pick another thing. Maybe we'll try. I'll find something that continues this theme that we're talking about, but within Abraham's life, of both, where is righteousness found, and how does it connect to the whole story of the fall at the beginning of Genesis, and we'll take it from there.